Imagine this. You're standing in front of one of the most famous royal guards in the world. They're stoic, unmoving, a symbol of centuries-old tradition. But what happens when a clueless tourist steps way too close? Too close to break the rules? What happens next will shock you, and you'll want to stick around to see why it's not just the tourist who learned a lesson that day. Before we begin this powerful story, drop a comment below to let us know where you're watching from. And remember to like and subscribe so you don't miss any of the stories that will stay with you long after they're shared. In the heart of London, beneath the gaze of centuries-old architecture, a tradition that has remained steadfast through wars, revolutions, and the tides of history stands unbroken. Horse Guards Parade. It's here, amid the hustle of tourists and the ceaseless march of time, that one small act of curiosity will soon send ripples through a system built on centuries of discipline. At first glance, the Royal Guard seems like any other tourist attraction. Their red uniforms, their towering bearskin hats, their rigid, unmoving stance, it all feels as though it's part of the spectacle of London. The laughter of onlookers, the flash of cameras, all seem to paint a picture of performance. But nothing could be further from the truth. These men and women do not stand to entertain, they stand for something far greater. The Foot Guards, 5 regiments, each with its own storied history, are the first to rise to the challenge of maintaining the monarchy's honor. From the Grenadiers to the Welsh Guards, they wear the uniforms of a nation, grounded in centuries of pride and ceremony. They are not soldiers in the traditional sense, they are symbols, embodiments of discipline and unwavering loyalty. Yet, as the sun rises over the Horse Guards Parade, a new face enters the scene. Sandra Wilson, a tourist from the other side of the world, excited, eager, oblivious to the rules that govern the space she has just walked into, a camera in hand, a wide grin on her face, her curiosity brimming with the thought of interacting with what she assumes are mere statues. Her playful nature leads her closer to the guards, unaware that her next few steps will soon cross a line. From the side, an experienced tour guide known only as John watches. He's seen it all before: the jokes, the selfies, the constant disregard for the centuries-old rituals that these guards embody. He's heard the comments, seen the signs ignored, and witnessed the growing number of tourists who mistake this sacred duty for a performance. But John knows better. He's been here long enough to see the consequences of a misstep, and today he can already sense that something is about to happen. The question is, will anyone stop it in time? The stage is set. The guards stand unmoving, their faces stoic, their roles unchanged. The tourists gather, their chatter filling the air. But in the midst of it all, one person is about to learn the hard way that curiosity and tradition don't always mix. Her eyes, wide with awe, dart from one soldier to the next, admiring the splendor of the blues and royals as they stand at attention, each soldier an unyielding pillar of discipline. To Sandra, though, the scene before her is not so much about tradition as it is about the perfect photo op. After all, she's traveled far to see this royal display, and surely there's no harm in a little closer inspection. But as she takes a few more steps toward the mounted guard, her curiosity pulls her closer. Too close. Her hand inches toward the reins of the horse, her fingers brushing lightly against the leather. She doesn't pause to consider the rules, the centuries of tradition, or the silent authority these soldiers represent. In Sandra's world, the horses are simply another part of the spectacle, just another image to capture and share. The soldier remains still, his gaze forward, but it's a look that speaks volumes. His role is not to engage with the crowd, but to guard the crown no matter what or who crosses his path. The mistake is made. The significance of the guard's post is lost on her, but the consequences are not. These soldiers do not stand for entertainment. They do not perform for the crowd. Each movement is deliberate, every glance a symbol of authority, and yet Sandra's hand lingers. The reins are not for touching. They are not for tourists' amusement. As Sandra's fingers curl around the reins, the mood shifts. A ripple of unease spreads through the crowd. The laughter falters, and eyes widen in silent warning. Some, unsure of the soldier's response, continue to film, capturing a moment that might become an international viral sensation. Others begin to exchange uneasy glances, their smiles fading. The whispers start. What's happening? Has Sandra done something wrong? The tourists around her now look at the scene with growing tension. A handful begin to murmur, uncertain about what's unfolding before them. Some chuckle nervously, as though the situation might dissolve into a harmless misunderstanding. But there are no signs of amusement from the soldier. His face remains stoic, unreadable. Still, the air feels heavy, thick with the realization that Sandra's playful touch has triggered something much more serious than she could have anticipated. Before anyone can fully process the tension in the air, a security guard steps forward. He's seen this act before. Tourists pushing boundaries, thinking they're part of the show. His voice is calm but firm. "Step back, please. No closer." Sandra, unaware of the gravity of her actions, waves him off with a casual shrug. She doesn't get it, not yet. To her, this is just another step in the fun of the day, another moment to capture. She brushes him off, thinking it's all part of the pageantry. But that's the difference between the tourists who come to London seeking spectacle and those who understand the weight of the traditions that live in these streets. The guards are not actors in a play. They are warriors with history in their veins. Sandra's misunderstanding runs deep, and it's about to collide head-on with reality. Off to the side, John, the tour guide, watches all of this unfold. His role is familiar, to help tourists understand the significance of what they're seeing. But today, he's more of an observer than an educator. As Sandra's misstep grows, John can only shake his head. He's seen it countless times. Tourists mistaking the royal guard for little more than costumed performers in a theme park. To them, the soldiers are just props in a picture-perfect London moment. But for John, it's more than just a mistake. It's a disregard for history itself. Some people just don't get it, John mutters to himself. His voice is laced with frustration. Ha! They think they can touch the guards, play with the horses, like they're at a show. But there's a reason they stand still, and it's not for you to entertain them. Sandra's curiosity grows, pushing her further than the average tourist. What began as a casual touch of the horse's reins now turns into something more deliberate. Her hand stretches out once more, this time with a firmness that mirrors her growing sense of entitlement. Without hesitation, her fingers curl around the reins again, and in that moment, the tension in the air thickens. The soldier doesn't flinch. His posture is as stiff as ever, his gaze forward, unwavering. Yet there's something palpable in the air, a shift, a subtle energy that signals a breaking point is near. Sandra, however, doesn't seem to notice the mounting tension. To her, this is a harmless interaction, a trivial moment in her tourist adventure. But to the guards, every action carries weight. They don't break character, not out of defiance, but because it is their duty. This is not a show for Sandra to control. It is a responsibility, a centuries-old practice that has no room for inconsiderate gestures. The stoicism of the soldier, it's the stillness in the face of provocation speaks volumes. And yet, Sandra doesn't see it. She's too caught up in her own little world of curiosity, oblivious to the significance of her actions. The horse shifts slightly under her grip, its instincts reacting to the force of her hand. The soldier remains unmoved, but his eyes, if one looks closely, hold a glint of warning. Still, the mask remains intact. His silence only makes the situation more chilling. His training demands that he remain disciplined, unmoved by provocations. But this isn't just any provocation. It's the second time Sandra has crossed the line, and this time there's no ignoring it. As Sandra's hand grips the reins once again, a murmur runs through the crowd. From the edge, an older woman, perhaps in her 60s, dressed in practical clothes, stands watching. Her experienced eyes have seen this kind of behavior before, and her lips curl into a tight frown. She knows better than to dismiss the gravity of the situation. Her gaze flicks between Sandra and the guard, her eyebrows furrowing with a mixture of concern and disappointment. The older woman mutters quietly under her breath, "You don't mess with the guards. Not like that." She glances at Sandra, as if hoping for the young tourist to heed the unspoken advice. Her voice is almost a whisper, but it holds the weight of lived experience, a reminder that some traditions demand respect. Yet, her warning is ignored, lost in the chaos of tourists who think this all exists for their entertainment. The older woman's face is marked with frustration as she watches Sandra, who remains undeterred. Despite hearing the advice, Sandra is too caught up in her own sense of playfulness to heed it. The older woman sighs, shaking her head, before walking away. As she leaves, there's a quiet sense of finality in the air, a recognition that events are about to unfold in ways Sandra cannot yet understand. Sandra, emboldened by the lack of immediate reaction from the soldier, steps closer again. Her fingers wrap around the reins once more, her grip firmer this time, as though daring the soldier to react. The air is thick with the buzz of tourists around her, their murmurs growing louder as they anticipate what will happen next. But no one, not Sandra, not the crowd, could have predicted the shift that's about to occur. What was once playful curiosity has now transformed into outright provocation. The soldier's eyes, previously narrowed in concentration, snap to life. Without hesitation, his voice cuts through the crowd, sharp and commanding. "Get off the reins!" The words echo with a force that's as chilling as it is unexpected. Sandra, caught completely off guard, freezes for a moment. Her face, once filled with amusement, now shows the realization of what she's done. The crowd falls silent, as if collectively holding their breath. Time seems to slow as the tension escalates. The camera lingers on Sandra's shocked expression, her eyes wide, her mouth slightly open, struggling to process the guard's sudden reaction. A few tourists step back, instinctively recognizing the gravity of the moment. Others continue to film, almost oblivious to the sudden shift in tone, as if they're expecting something even more dramatic to unfold. But this moment isn't about spectacle, it's about the breaking point of a situation that spiraled out of control. The soldier, however, remains still, unmoved like a statue. His gaze hardens, and his posture grows even more rigid. With a voice that is firm, unyielding, and laden with authority, he repeats his command, "Get back!" The words are not shouted, but they carry a weight that demands instant obedience. His tone makes it clear that this is no longer a playful interaction, and Sandra's lack of respect for his duty has crossed a line. Sandra, flustered, but still convinced she's witnessing some sort of staged performance, takes a step back. Her hand releases the reins, but the confusion on her face is palpable. She stumbles slightly as she retreats, her expression one of disbelief. Why was he reacting like this? To Sandra, it's still a game, a part of the show. But to the soldier, it's a reminder that some lines should never be crossed. Around her, the crowd shifts uneasily, the atmosphere charged with a sense of discomfort. The situation has escalated, but Sandra remains undeterred. She doesn't fully grasp the seriousness of what just transpired. She's still caught in the idea that this is all a part of the performance she's come to witness. But in the eyes of the soldiers, it's a stark reminder that some roles are far more than just a show, but potentially even mortal threats. Off to the side, standing silently, a veteran guard from the Coldstream Guards observes the unfolding scene with a cold, quiet disdain. He has seen the way tourists treat the guards in recent years, dismissing their discipline, treating them as nothing more than statues in a tourist attraction. He has lived through times when tourists would never have dared to cross that line. His gaze never falters as he watches Sandra's provocation unfold. There's a subtle tightening of his jaw, a reminder of the deep sense of duty that he and his fellow soldiers uphold. The veteran has served long enough to know how far respect for the guards has fallen in the eyes of the public. In the past, there was a certain reverence, a quiet understanding of the gravity of the soldier's role. Today, that reverence is slipping away, replaced by amusement and disrespect. As Sandra retreats, still flustered but now a bit shaken by the soldier's response, the Coldstream Guard's stare remains fixed on her. His thoughts are left unspoken, but the look in his eyes says it all. This wasn't just about Sandra. It was about the tradition and pride that are slowly being eroded by the very tourists who come to witness it. His gaze shifts to the soldier who remains unwavering, and for a brief moment, the unspoken rivalry between the Grenadier Guards and Coldstream Guards pulses in the air. The silent, fierce pride of the Coldstream Guards is evident in the way he watches over the entire exchange, adding yet another layer of intensity to the situation. There is no confrontation between the guards, no outward sign of the competition that brews beneath the surface. But for the veteran, the reaction from Sandra and the tourists surrounding her speaks volumes. This is a clash of worlds, one where duty is paramount and another where curiosity runs unchecked. The tension in the air is palpable as the police finally arrive. Their uniforms contrast sharply with the ceremonial grandeur of the guards, the authority of the law stepping into the fray. They approach Sandra, who stands with an almost defiant air, still processing what just happened. The camera follows every moment, capturing the exchange between the officers and the woman who never thought her curiosity would lead to this. The mounted soldier, unmoving as ever, has already reported the incident. His duty is done, he has upheld the tradition of the guard, and now the law steps in. The police officer addresses Sandra, his tone controlled, professional. The officer's calm demeanor is almost unnerving, a sharp contrast to the rising unease of the crowd around them. As he speaks to Sandra, explaining the seriousness of her actions, the bystanders murmur among themselves. Some sympathize with her, seeing her as a tourist caught up in the excitement of London, but others, those who witness the guard's firm reaction, feel no pity. Sandra has crossed a line, and she must face the consequences. "Move along, please, miss." The officer's voice is soft, but it holds an undeniable authority. His words cut through the uncertainty, leaving Sandra with no option but to comply. But she doesn't leave easily. She hesitates, her gaze flickering between the officer and the tourists who are still filming the scene. Some in the crowd look on with amusement, others shake their heads. The murmurs grow louder. Sandra has become the center of attention, her actions a spectacle for the masses. But now it's clear, this is no longer a game. As the police officer leads her away, the camera lingers on Sandra's face, confused, frustrated, and still stubbornly convinced that she hasn't done anything truly wrong. She brushes the officer's words aside, as if this whole situation were just a misunderstanding. But the reality of the situation begins to sink in. The crowd is growing restless, the initial sympathy for Sandra slowly waning. As Sandra is escorted away, we learn more about her. A woman who has perhaps crossed boundaries before and faced little consequence. Flashbacks paint a picture of her traveling through Europe, a self-proclaimed adventurer who often tests the limits of what she can get away with. At Buckingham Palace, another royal guard had once scolded her for getting too close. She had laughed it off, thinking of it as just another part of the tourist experience. But this time, it's different. The consequences are clearer now. Sandra's sense of entitlement, built up over years of similar encounters, hasn't prepared her for the reality of how seriously these guards take their duty. She has built a pattern of misbehaving. Too close to the soldiers, too careless in her actions. But today, that behavior has reached its breaking point. The narrative of a carefree tourist crumbles as she realizes this wasn't just another performance. This was real. She stares at the police officer, then back at the crowd. The realization hits her slowly, but it's evident. What once seemed like harmless curiosity has now placed her in the spotlight. Only it's not the admiration of the crowd she sought. It's the weight of law and order that now surrounds her. She begins to move along, but the discomfort lingers in the air, both for her and for those watching. Some still feel sorry for her, but there's no denying that what was once playful has now become a lesson learned the hard way. Sandra, her face flushed with embarrassment, is escorted away by the police. The chaos that had swirled around her a moment ago seems to dissipate with her departure. The crowd, once full of whispers and eager smartphones, begins to scatter slowly but surely, yet the guard remains, a silent sentinel resolute in his duty. The royal guard, unmoved by the commotion, resumes his post without a second glance at the departing woman. His presence is steady, unwavering. Nothing about him has changed. The soldier's stoic demeanor, his unmoving posture, and the silence he holds in the face of provocation reflect a core principle that never falters: discipline and tradition. His position is more than ceremonial. It is a living embodiment of centuries-old traditions, and he carries this weight without hesitation. As the crowd thins out and the noise fades, the guard remains in place, his form unshaken. He is a figure who stands in defiance of the modern world's often chaotic and fleeting moments. His role has never been to entertain or engage. It is to protect, to honor, and to uphold a legacy. The narrator's voice, steady and clear, reflects this timeless truth, reminding the audience that such discipline is not for show, it is for history. This is not a performance, it is a duty that stretches back through the ages. Meanwhile, Sandra, her steps slower now, walks away from the scene, her mind racing. Her earlier defiance gives way to a realization. The magnitude of her mistake settles in her chest, heavy and undeniable. She had underestimated the significance of her actions, the sacred duty behind the guard's post, the unwavering commitment to tradition. She is now, undoubtedly, more aware of the gravity of the situation she provoked. As she walks further away, she doesn't look back again, but the echo of the confrontation lingers within her. Her departure marks the end of her brief encounter with the royal guard, but the lessons learned, for her and the audience alike, are far more enduring. In the fading moments, John, the tour guide, reappears, offering his final thoughts. With a reflective tone, he addresses the crowd, those still lingering, and the viewers who are left contemplating the events. "The gods aren't here for entertainment," John says, his voice carrying the weight of lived experience. "They represent centuries of tradition and duty. The blues and royals in particular are far more than ceremonial figures. They are tied deeply to the monarchy and the history of this nation. Every soldier in that regiment carries with him a piece of British heritage." He gestures toward the steadfast guard, who continues his vigil. His words carry more than just the authority of a tour guide. They are a reminder to all who visit London. These guards are not mere statues to be approached at will. They are men who stand as a living testament to the continuity of British identity. Tradition isn't just a page in a book, it's a legacy upheld in the face of every distraction, every laugh, every misunderstanding. As the crowd gradually disperses, the royal guard remains, standing tall and resolute. The chaos of the tourists has faded, but his posture has not wavered. The unbroken figure, standing resolutely in place, becomes a symbol of the resilience of the tradition he represents. Sandra, now just another face in the crowd, slowly vanishes from view, but the image of the guard remains, a monument not just to history but to the enduring power of discipline, duty, and respect. This story of discipline, tradition, and respect is just one example of how the modern world often forgets the importance of cultural legacies. As we encounter these figures in our daily lives, whether at historical sites or even in our daily routines, it's important to remember their significance. The royal guards represent something far deeper than a tourist attraction. They are living symbols of a nation's heritage. Have you ever had a run-in with something or someone who challenged your respect for tradition or authority? Share your thoughts in the comments below. What did you learn from that encounter? And if you found this story fascinating, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more eye-opening tales of history, culture, and lessons learned. Stay tuned for the next chapter, where we delve deeper into the untold stories behind the royal family's most iconic symbols. Until next time, remember, respect for history isn't just about understanding the past, it's about honoring it every day.